Welcome, everyone. Welcome, everyone, entrepreneurs, change makers, and all around impact enthusiasts to Communitas America Fireside Chat with Yulkendy Valdez, founder, CEO of Forefront, where she's going to talk about her culturally relevant hiring app that was that uses the power of AI and data to support POC workforce. My name is Esmeralda Herrera, Director of Programs and Community Relations for Communitas America, a nonprofit that supports social impact ecosystem in underserved communities. So introducing Yulkendy, Forbes 30 Under 30 social entrepreneur, TEDx speaker, Latino 30 Under 30 honorees, El Mundo Boston, and Forefront, where she helps employers, schools, and nonprofit create a low barrier experience for youth ages 16 to 24 to facilitate the transition from education to career. So please help me welcome Yulkendy.
Super honored to be here. I'm excited for this conversation. I love the work Communitas is doing. I wish I was part of this upcoming cohort. I love all the ventures and what you all are working on.
Wonderful. Well, we're really happy to have you here. So, Yulkendi, to start, we're going to play a little game. It's only 1 minute. We're going to do 1 quick minute on the clock, and we're going to do a speed round of your favorite and helpful resources throughout your entrepreneur journey. And although you've had a specific entrepreneur journey, sometimes these may be really helpful to entrepreneurs in terms of navigating their challenges. So, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm bad with favorites, but I'll try.
Okay.
I'll try to do a good job.
And it may not be favorites. Maybe it's just the first thing that pops into your head, or maybe the recent thing. And I think sometimes these little quick, this is what helped me at one point, can really be helpful. So we'll go through. Some of them are fun, and some of them will just be helpful. But again, the short 30 seconds, we'll get started with our fireside chat afterwards. Okay, so Yulkendi, helpful book.
Mom test.
A helpful podcast.
Yo, I don't listen to podcasts as much, but the one with How I Built This is really good.
Okay.
While the treadmill to get the energy pumping.
Awesome. A social media outlet that you prefer.
Ooh, I just recently started getting into Twitter because that's the way to network. But I really started maximizing LinkedIn and connecting with people and writing more blogs and articles.
Awesome. Now, what about an example social impact organization that you really like? And I know there are probably a lot.
Oh my goodness. Just a ton. Resolution Project was my first funder. They fund social entrepreneurs all over the world. Young People For was my introduction to social justice. And then in the space that I'm in of workforce development, you have the Braven, the Year Up, the Posse, and all these organizations doing great work to increase the diversity of young people in corporate America. So that list is endless.
Yes, endless. And so, you know what? Thank you for getting us started. And we'll try to link a couple of those organizations in the comments so people can check them out. So, thank you for getting us started with them. Now, let's begin. Help us out. And why AI?
Yeah. I'm a non-tech founder. I didn't even know I wanted to build a tech company. I was born in the Dominican Republic, moved to the United States at the age of 11, ended up in good old Missouri, Midwest, when there are not a lot of Dominicans, and actually went to school in Ferguson, which is now notorious for better or worse, what happened with Michael Brown and the murder of Michael Brown at the hands of the police. And now for better, it's definitely the rise of the newer Black Lives Matter movement. And to me, to get raised in that environment where all of a sudden America became my teacher. I live in a street where you can go one way. There's tons of resources, and you can see the other way in a completely different story. So I knew I wanted to do something to bridge the gaps. I didn't understand business. So I said, let me go on and go to business school. And that's how I ended up in the East Coast, right outside of Boston. And my own journey trying to get this internships and full-time job and realizing, hey, these systems aren't built for me. I don't have the social capital. I had the skills. I was equally talented, but it was way more difficult for me to land these opportunities. So for me, it was the urgency to solve that problem, knowing the majority of the workforce is going to be people of color. And I found my co-founder in college, who was also a kid who grew up in Queens with a single mother and had that story. And so we went full time with this business post college, and ended up essentially building a diversity training company. Didn't plan to be a practitioner, but it's just a problem. I wanted to change culture and mindsets, and ended up with big customers like SAP, these huge tech companies that said, hey, you got to scale this. Start thinking about artificial intelligence, start thinking about the power of text messaging to train millions. So we said, hey, this is pretty good technology. Why not even start earlier and use it to train young people that can't go to these programs? They can't afford the transportation, they don't have the money, or they work two part-time jobs, but they can learn over text message at 9 p.m. And new skills. So now we have tools like Carmen, which in Spanish and English, students can reach out, get resume review over text, run through an interview, and get connected with mentors, all without having to leave their house, which is now even more relevant with COVID. So I say all that to say, I didn't plan to build a tech company. I just follow my customers, and it led me to where I am today.
Wow, and that's, I think, really powerful in many parts of your story, right? Um, Following the customer, which is really what entrepreneurs want to be doing. And I think your story, and we've kind of heard in a lot of different podcasts of, being born in DR and then coming here and seeing just a lot of the impact, right? And you talked about that. A lot of the impact on Black lives, on people of color lives, right? And wanting to make that difference. And something you can see on your website is that, yeah, Gen Z will have 47% people of color. Now, correct me the statistic if I got it right or wrong, and that's a huge population of people. So now, Baptist, tell us a little bit about how your business evolved from a dorm room startup at Baptist, and I think formerly Project 99 till now. And you kind of started talking about it a little bit, following your customers. But please share us, how did that start looking?
Yeah, as you mentioned, we even have a different name at the beginning. I think there's a lot of hype about how you start a company. You have to have a strategy, the right name, the right placement. To us, we came up with the name in 2 seconds. And we just spent so much time piloting and experimenting. We didn't know what the company was going to be. And then when we realized, we're actually going to do this full time, I had a moment. I was about to sign up a full time consulting offer. But then right when I was about to do that, I saw another Black man, this time Alton Sterling, out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, get killed by the police. And I said, I cannot show up to this 9 to 5 anymore. I got to do this work now. And then obviously you see the data where 48% people of color. The time is now. So when we made that decision, you said, wait a minute, we're still first generation kids. We know backup, like how we're actually gonna do this. And I had to have that tough conversation with my family. But once I got lucky that they accepted, that I was really following my passions. It's just getting on the phone with a lot of customers. We didn't have a website. We didn't have anything. We just started selling, and if they told us they wanted something different, we sell something different. We experimenting, and ended up with the number one software company in the world, SAP, as our first customer. So it's just to show, don't believe the hype of having to have everything right. It's just about following your gut and the problem, and just interacting with a lot of customers and see who's willing to be early champions. And so for that, that was our process, and we took that one champion and was able to multiply it into more customers.
Yeah, follow the problem. I think that's a really famous line from Annie Chang. She writes, fall in love with the problem, not your solution. And I think that's where you've been able to see that success, being able to see, okay, what are my customers saying? So now, a lot of our entrepreneurs can have moments of doubt, right? And I think that happens with, especially I think with a lot of our first generation entrepreneurs. So what were some of your transformative moments or decisions from Project 99 all the way now to Forefront?
Yeah, I think there's this fear of like the first version got to be the end product. I mean, we pivoted like 20 times, not only changing the name, but what we do. I mean, we, especially a lot of the folks in this call, I imagine we're solving big societal problems. These are hard questions. It's okay to pivot. At the end of the day, like, people are not going to be, oh, you change what you do next week. As long as you're consistent, as long as the founders behind it are consistent, are respectful, are professional, they don't care what your solution looks like. You're the one that has to be consistent, but your idea is allowed to change. And that's something that, at the moment, I'm like, we're having to pivot again. We're having to adjust part of the plan. It sucked. It wasn't the most fun, but now looking back at it, it's one of our strengths as a team, and now landed us into a product that can be scalable. The technology came 3 years later for us. We literally launched it this year. We went full time in 2017. And that's to say, it's definitely not a linear journey. And, we had to acknowledge that we might not follow the traditional timeline, but let's own our timeline. And what are the metrics we want year after year? I think that we still did fall for it a little bit. I think in 2019, for example, right before we were about to build this new tech product, we spent so much time talking to investors. And a lot of, especially impact investors, they have their own vision of impact, and they want to send you in a completely different direction. And we ended up taking some money that we ultimately gave back because these investors didn't follow our vision. And there's so much progress that could have happened if we just stayed how we started, which is with our customers. But we got sidetracked a little bit because we believe the hype. You got to fundraise, you got to get money, you got to be everywhere. I wish we didn't, but through that experience, we learned a ton, and now we're just uber focused again on customers and iterating from there.
Wow, that's really powerful, and we'll be able to talk a little bit later about funding for Forefront and how that looked like and how that's looking like now. I think particularly, as first generation entrepreneur, as a woman of color entrepreneur, right? But I think you said something so valuable. We were also going to touch on it a little bit later, sticking to your mission. We, Communitas America, we feel so passionate about creating social impact and staying with your mission, and making sure at least reiterate it, right? If you make it specific that, whatever it is that you're doing, you're not changing it so much that you fall in love with the problem, not the solution. So, you talked about having to reiterate a few times. Was there a moment where you felt like hanging up the towel and just saying, you know what, this ain't for me? And how did you push past that? I think for a lot of our entrepreneurs, as they're starting out, they're going to encounter a lot of these challenges. And we'd love to hear some of your advice for that.
Yeah, I mean, I have many of those moments, but most recently, last October, before we even knew a pandemic was going to hit us, I was pitching in LA. I was invited as a finalist to pitch in front of education and workforce investors. It was mostly a group of white women, but as it happens, you can tell where you're like that third or fourth woman of color. So we're two Black women and then three white women, and you already tense walking into the environment. You're the minority. You have to do way better than they expect because you're already seen as a token in this event. So there was a lot of anxiety with events like that. And, you know, I've done a ton, but it doesn't get old having to step up and feel that pressure that you have to represent. And then on top of that, my business itself is about diversity inclusion. So I'm a Black woman founder. I'm a Latina, and I'm also representing people of color in my work. And I have to talk about that through my pitch. And I just remember feeling so heavy, and at the end, either getting like a pat on the back, oh, that's such nice work you do for the community. And again, what I can, you know, at that point, I can see through that. And the reality is for many of the work we do, as much as people want to understand it, if they don't live it, it's kind of that pat on the back thing. It's not a business or it's not urgent. It's just a nice thing to do. And it gets to you. And I had that moment where we already at that point we are just starting to pivot to a tech business. We're mainly doing diversity training, doing unconscious bias workshops. We were doing a lot of engagements where you can tell people were not in for the right reasons. And so when you're trying to change the culture, it's tough. And so I think at that moment I walked out, I cried, I walked all over LA after that event. And it wasn't because I win or lost, didn't get the money. It's just the heaviness of it all and having to feel that role. And I called my co-founder and I said, hey, if we're going to continue to do this, we need to take power over our venture again. I can't build a product for the white man. There's a lot of products out there. And I felt like at one point we were trying to minimize ourselves because we needed to get on the door because ultimately someone for the majority group had to let us in. So us now building a product strictly for students, young people of color is our way of reclaiming our power. And that was the only way at that point that I can continue to do this business. So definitely had a lot of those moments.
Well, and that's why, you know, having these fireside chats with, you know, women of color, Black women, Latino women are so important, right? Because we don't get to hear those stories of like, okay, I created my business, but when I introduced it to someone, it was like a pat on the back, you know, and there wasn't a different type of appreciation or different type of excitement that I saw maybe with some other founders. And the fact that you're able to push past that, you know, you and your team, and say, no, we're still sticking to our mission, because the more we leave our mission to go toward funders, which may be someone else's, you know, perspective or goal, but your goal is social impact first, right? So before we dive into social impact, I want to talk a little bit about Carmen, right? Your bot. Tell us, how is Carmen supporting students and employers? Because you kind of have those multiple stakeholders, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, what we're seeing is that there's still this myth. Obviously, there's not the pipeline. There's not enough young people of color coming out of college with those skills. Employers are struggling to find them, but you know that's still all like myth. It's an excuse. We know it. What the data is actually telling us, more and more young people of color are applying to in-demand industries in tech and business. They're just not making it through that hiring process because of bias. Either something goes wrong in the screening. They, you know, if a young person of color went to a school or got training where they didn't get to do a lot of technical interviews or screenings, they're going to be at a disadvantage than someone who had that at their disposal. Also, the hiring still mainly operates through referrals. You're most likely to get a job if you're a referral. So once a young person of color notices, well, I don't know anybody at their company, that kind of disincentivizes them from continuing the process because they think that's the only way I'm going to get this job. And so what we're trying to do is democratize access to those referrals, social capital information, to help young people of color get as far into the process as possible. So with Carmen, they can get 24/7 support with making sure their resume is good to go, making sure they can practice those those interviews and screenings, making sure they can get those referrals and make those relationships. So by the time they get that interview, they feel confident going into that process. So it's like Carmen is a personal career assistant that you can text and message around the clock. For the employer, we're saying, hey, the talent is there. And here's the data to prove it. Here's the skills that they have, and they're ready to contribute to your company. So for employers, we're helping them recruit diverse talent, but also helping them understand how they should do hiring differently in the first place. So we're really excited as a result of COVID-19. And then the other pandemic, which is the blatant racism that we have, we're launching a new fellowship model for Black and Latinx college students to get 24/7 career support and access to mentorship. We're going to launch a cohort of 15 students who are not only going to get career support, but mental health support, because we need to think about career development beyond just a job. Is about our emotional well-being, is about, do we have food to get the training we need? So our fellows are going to get home deliver snacks and foods. Do I have computer? Do I have mobile hotspot? Our fellows are going to get a learning from home kit, because if we really want to even the playing field, we need holistic solutions. So we're also launching this new cool fellowship model we're excited about.
Awesome. I mean, oh my God, Yulkendy, if I had Carmen growing up, over here in the Boogie Down Bronx, maybe I would have been somewhere different. Maybe not. I don't know. I feel super passionate about social impact, but at least I would have had some questions answered along the way. So I could definitely see such a huge value that forefront that you guys are adding. How were you able to really reiterate, Carmen? So I know you talked a lot about, like, okay, I communicate with a lot of my customers. Just tell us a little bit of those details. I know some of our entrepreneurs, they're constantly, creating reiterations, right? Be that of an app or service. And so how do you hone in and gather some of that data from your stakeholders?
Yeah, no, I mentioned the mom test earlier. And I'm really bad with favorites, because I think the assumption, it's like entrepreneurs are always asked their favorite books, podcasts. Entrepreneurs are building. We're not reading. We're not reading books. When my teachers ask that, I'm like, I don't have book recommendations for you, because if you want to be entrepreneur, you should be building and doing. But I understand that's important too. And another book that helped recently, it's the Discipline Entrepreneurship book. It's an MIT book, but entrepreneurship is an art, but there's known steps that are proven that are effective. So that's another book I recommend. Discipline Entrepreneurship has like 36 steps, and it helps with that early customer segmentation and product market fit. So now, after doing it wrong for many years, right now in 2020, we started with releasing Carmen, getting students in our wait list. And then I got on the phone with as many of those students as possible, doing user interviews, just learning about the background, generally getting to know them, and then also just getting more direct feedback on, hey, what worked, what wish Carmen could do for you, and what didn't work. And those interviews were very, very helpful. And essentially we got to learn from Carmen's super fans. And from then on, we've been iterating new features. Granted, those are the end users. We also needed validation from our customers. So once we got some sort of validation from the end user, which is a student, in June, we said, okay, it's time to see if this product we got here, we can sell it. So we started doing campaigns with different potential customers. And there's some that say, hey, pick a target customer right off the bat. You should know it, should be really specific. I think that if you know it, that's great. But if you don't, trust me, don't let that paralyze you. I think we still don't know. I mentioned employers, establish HR and D&I teams have been huge validators for us. But equally, we have customers that are schools and nonprofits. So we're still testing. And what we do is we send one campaign at a time, try to figure out you know, the budgets, the time to close, and then we rank them at the end of the day. So I suggest doing ranking prioritization exercises, but take your time. You know, it's not figure out your target market in 1 month. Again, it's like our third year and we're still trying to figure out. And in those experiments, you might realize even a bigger business. So what I would say is just continue to experiment day to day. And then once you feel you have all the data, prioritize those target markets and begin to focus on the top one or two.
Awesome. Thank you. And I think, you talk a lot about discipline, right? But discipline in your own um, route, right? Because you're right, everyone's journey is going to be different. And though some of those books you recommended, I'm sure will be really helpful. They may or may not resonate really differently. So let's jump into social impact, right? You describe yourself as a social entrepreneur. Why does that word resonate with you?
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning, I was like, I love this idea. You can make money and make impact too, and there shouldn't be shame on you wanting to make money out of doing good. It should be the norm, actually. And so I've been a big proponent of that. But other than that, I had to really um, demystify the term because when I first read about social entrepreneurship, it was the founders were mainly white women and white men that went to sub-Saharan Africa and solve a problem, or India, and either had a one-to-one model and did all these things. And so I was like, there has to be other ways that beyond those models that you can do social impact work, and also there has to be a ton of people that look like me should be doing this work. Why are they not featured? So I think my own venture has been a way of exploring what that means, and through jumping in the space, I now I've gotten the pleasure to join a lot of founder communities with a lot of cool people just doing amazing things that are also very good businesses, because this whole thing, we're no longer the minority, we're about to be the main consumer. So these ideas are main money makers. So I hate every time, and I'm sure many on the call experience when you get in a call with a mentor and advisor and they try to school you for 15 minutes on, oh, this thing is not going to make you any money, forget about it, pat in the back, it's a lifestyle business. Don't listen to that. First of all, if they were really that smart, they should just focus on helping you, not on monopolizing and telling you what we can do. And I still get on those phones, and I take that in, but at the end of the day, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm my vision, and I know that is a real business.
Yeah. Um, Tell us a little bit about the social change. And you talked about this in the beginning. You're like, look, this is what inspired me. I knew that there was a lot of issues that we're going to overcome, right? Especially here in the US, where there's a lot of, race tensions, right? And a lot of systemic racism. Um, but let's talk about, like, what is the social change that you hope Forefront can provide?
Yeah, no, we always had our vision sum up on 30% by 2030, and you see many pledges around this in the diversity world, but for us is really diverse leadership in the United States. We know if the face of leadership changes, we're going to create the ripple effect. It sounds easier said than done, right? Because to get a lot of people of color to leadership positions, it's going to take a lot of breaking down of existing systems. And the reason we say 30% is because right now 30% of the country is Black and Latinx, yet we only have 3% of us represented in U.S. senior leadership. So if by 2030 we can start getting as closer to 30%, we're going to be better off as a society. Obviously, by 2030, we just talked about Gen Z. Our population's only increasing. So 30% is still just a minimum we need to hit. We need to get as closer to 50% of us, being in, having a seat at the table. So for us, that's what our long-term vision looks like, and it starts with getting young people of color into these in-demand industries.
Yeah, and I think that's a important goal, right? We don't see enough diverse leadership, and so getting to 30%, right? I see where you come. You're like, look, this is the reason why 30% was created. How are you able to track that data? I know that with this new fellowship coming up, right, you'll be able to kind of survey and keep track with the students. But what about employers? Are they going to be reporting those data? So, yeah, how are you measuring that data?
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's I know we talk a lot about data, but we don't talk a lot about the challenge to get that data. So at the end of the day, what kept us going is what are the customers saying? Having honest conversation about our customers. Why did you hire us in the first place? And why did you hire us again? What really worked? And just celebrating those small wins, especially with the systems that we're working with, whether it's food scarcity or water education, it's gonna take bunch of solutions to get to that data point that you want. So I learned to celebrate the small wins. And as a visionary, it was tough because I'm like, I wanted to prove myself each day that I was, changing the world. I really wanted, but in reality, it takes a long time. So we just learned to capture customer stories and then also the end user, why were the young professionals of color, the students in the room feeling about our work. I would say in the training business, it's harder to measure culture. So that's one of the reasons we're also focused more on tools like Carmen, because with students, you can measure more easily. Are they getting employment? The salary, the wages, what are they looking like? You can measure the emotional well-being. You can measure their engagement, their retention, the amount of promotions they're getting. So I would say now we're gonna have an easier time measuring, but it's tough when you start trying to tackle a big system, and even the employers don't have that data that we want.
Yeah, that is so dope that Carmen is able to ask, kind of measure, or, right now in this new iteration, she's able to measure what is the wellness, what can you give us some examples of some of the questions that Carmen may ask these students? Maybe some vague questions.
Well, yeah, I would say I think that for that piece, it really depends on. So we're B2B, so we really work with the metrics of the institution. So I would say it definitely varies. But but I'm proud to say that people are looking more at emotional well-being, and it can be indicated by just as a self-assessment. How you feeling? Do you feel happy to go back to work every day? Do you feel accepted? Do you feel valued? Do you feel like you belong? Those are the sorts of indicators we can look at to measure overall well-being. But I think in the next few years, more and more organizations are going to start to measure this, which is cool to see, because again, it's not just about getting a job or financial stability. With everything going on in our world, our mental health is even more important.
For sure. That's so interesting. So, um, l- do you think that this has the potential not just to bring in diverse leadership, but kind of change the way people look at their work and how they interact with work? And although we see those changes now, right, folks are realizing emotional intelligence is important, right? Folks are realizing that wellness is important to millenniums and Gen Z as they start to take over the workforce. Can Carmen help us think differently on how we should be thinking of an employer?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. I think we're doing with Carmen is giving, empowering students to create a career where they want to thrive, and they can also see if that company is for them. I think what's happening, a lot of players in this ecosystem I play in are going to start ranking companies, and companies are going to be held more accountable. Like, you might not want to work there, or these are, and that information is going to be more transparent. I think you're even starting to see like Glassdoor and Indeed also do that. So it's showing the level of accountability is going to get higher, and it's going to give you more power to decide where you want to go, which is exciting. But overall, yeah, for us, we're challenging the status quo. That's why we talk about things like our hair. Doesn't matter how my hair looks. If I want mi pajon, I'm gonna bring mi pajon to the office. If I want to bring my Dominican food, and I don't care if it smells some sort of way. I'm like, I want to feel this is my space too. I own it. If I have my accent, I'm gonna be more proud to show it, not hide it. Those are these little things that make a huge difference in how people show up to work, and we're calling it out. And that we get to do that with Carmen. We've even including questions about what's your pronoun, how do you self-identify yourself. In the past, in traditional hiring processes, you didn't get to talk about things like this.
Yeah, so let's dive into funding, right? Which is a lot. Entrepreneurs, this is a huge hurdle, right? And I think for us, we've seen so many of entrepreneurs recognize, well, one, the Bronx has we received only 2% of the loan. So the big, COVID business grants that came out in New York City, the Bronx businesses only got 2% of that, of $200 million. So we really see the need to talk about funding. Tell us about your journey. Who was that first funder, and how much was it, if we may ask?
Yeah, and I'll start by saying, I'm definitely not an expert here, so looking forward to learning from everyone in the call about your own experiences. But I'm also proud that we've been as lean as and resilient as a team. I think a lot of our mentors will tell you the way we have managed money and challenged the way that business are built, and just create our own roadmap. I'm very proud of the work my team did, because we didn't even start entertaining VC money till, again, that 2019 journey. We really operated very lean, and were able to raise mainly non-dilutive funding from grants and accelerators. So we kept as much of our ownership as possible. So again, it's just, if you really don't need VC funding right now, don't believe the hype. Focus on what you're building and your customers. But obviously, we all need some money to get started. And as I mentioned, going out of graduation, I'm from a low-income family. There was no backup, so we needed some money to at least get us through the summer post-graduation. We already got in college, we did tons of pilots. So for our pilots, and to actually get us to a point where we can even do this full time, I think Resolution Project I mentioned earlier, they were my first funder. I remember having to, I was in Boston, I had to commute to Cambridge, and Massachusetts is like a puzzle. So I got lost, I was like late, and they were, they didn't say, just because of that, they didn't discard me. I had to pitch to them in a bar, and they were standing up because I missed it, and they were already at the happy hour of the event. And they loved my pitch, and I still made it to the finalist round, and that was a $3,000 check. But till now, I'm still an alumni, and I get mentorship from guides, they're called. So super powerful. And then when we needed to go full time, we did a startup weekend out of Techstars, and it was like French theme. It was this random theme, not related to what we were doing, but we got lucky because one of the mentors said, "Hey, I know an investor that loves the Dominican Republic." So we're like, okay. And this is like a very famous investor that like looks at Airbnb and that's who they invest. But we showed up to his place in Harlem and we were greeted by his butler, like two low income Dominican kids after like the Halloween party. And we were so nervous and I don't know what came out, but he wired 5 minutes after. It was just $5,000, but that was the $5,000 we needed to get us through the summer. And then going out of school, I said that we spend the majority of time pitching to customers, so we already had a big customer, and that's all we needed to get started. And then from there we got our next thing. So it's just got to get creative, resilient, and it's a lot of putting your heart on the line, but there's ways to build this outside of the traditional VC funding sphere.
Yeah, no, I really love your story because you're like, look, I may not know a lot about this, but this was my experience, right? And you had impact investor, which we hope we could talk about, and you're like, no, you know what, I don't want this money. Then you have these small grants from these accelerators, right, and these programs, and even pitching when you might hear a no, right? And for us, Communitas America, we do small grants to our entrepreneurs. We have $10,000. And sometimes we question, oh my God, is it enough? But I think listening to you, Yulkendy, is like you're saying, no, little things is enough to push and iterate forward, right? Which you now have Carmen, right? And these huge customers that now can continue your business. So tell us a little bit about that impact investor. For some of our audience member, they might be curious of what are they looking for, and I think why. Talk a little bit more about like why giving that money back, and was it difficult?
Yeah. So I think again, and it goes to my comment around data. Um, Impact investors are so obsessed. I mean, there's a lot of really good ones out there that I don't want to. I hate to generalize, but I think there's more than a few that are obsessed with data and frameworks. But who owns data? It's exactly the system we're trying to fight. Who creates the standards for that? White, heterosexual men. And so that in itself is a weapon against us. And so instead of asking for our experiences, and many of these founders that live these problems, we're having to fit our problems into this framework that wasn't created by us. So I think that's one of my main challenges with impact investors. I'm sure they're well intended, but I think it's a lot of talk. And ultimately, you want to give it a chance, right? Because you have to be in these rooms, you have to get credibility. But ultimately, in one case, I ended up giving my money back because you were, we were being put in a bucket. Oh, this is what you do well, and I'm like, I became a CEO, so I am in control of that vision, and I was trusted to fulfill that vision. And so if you don't trust me to figure out what the next move is, maybe you shouldn't be an investor in my business. So that was a big thing because in the beginning I used to hear, oh, you not all money is good. And I'm like, nah, I want that money. But now I get what that means. And we learned it the hard way.
No, I mean, and those are good lessons. And it's true. Not VC, not every organization is VC applicable. And that may not be what you want to go down that route, right? There's so many variables there. And I think one comment I want to make about what you spoke about data, right? If impact investors are looking at your data, how are you collecting it? And we talked about it before. But something that I was sharing just with some of our entrepreneurs is, if you got to kind of create, you have to find that data and create that data from our communities, because if not, it'll be assumed, right? And a lot of things have been assumed for our communities based on data that has its own framework, right? And that's what's so beautiful about what Carmen is doing, right? What Forefront is doing with Carmen, because now they don't have to fill in gaps with frameworks of whatever different data and assumptions. You're literally bringing it to you, right, to them. So how have you engaged with funders since then? So now I think you talked about you geared toward more, of your customers, and you've been able to gain more momentum. Have you still been in communication with some funders, and have your pitch style changed?
Well, at the beginning of the year, we did the TechStars program, which is a 3-month program accelerator, and they also invest in the businesses. So through that program, we did a demo day and connected with investors. But beyond that, yeah, we just after 2019, we knew we needed to take a break from investors, so we stayed true to that, and our KPIs right now are mainly customer driven. But having said, you definitely have to continue whether you're fundraising or not, having those conversations with potential funders and investors and getting on networking calls. They can also help with customer referrals too, even if they're not investing in you right away. So definitely we continue engaging with them, but in a more relationship development, asking for feedback and so forth. Now in terms of funding, been applying to grants, and a lot of grants have come out of COVID-19, and there's much more funding as people want to do more with supporting founders of color, specifically women of color. So I do take time out of my day to apply to a new grant, and now I have limits. Sometimes not going to waste my time anymore for a $1,000 grant. I'm trying, because we also deserve the big money. We also deserve the 100,000 plus money. So doing that, earlier I mentioned used to do pitch competitions, and that's really good free cash. I pause on those because, as I mentioned, it's really vulnerable. It's raining, so I allow myself to take a break from those. So it's about figuring out what's productive for you now, and how to best maximize your time. But yeah, put your application in, because you never know. That's a way you can get some extra money. If you're not fundraising strictly from VCs, there's these other ways to do in the meantime.
Awesome. Thank you for that, for sharing that. So, before we dive a little bit more into the fellowship program that you guys are launching soon, because I'm sure everybody wants to find out some details, let's talk co founders. So, Forefront has a couple of co founders. Please let me know. And the reason why I want to ask this is because the journey is scary alone, right? And sometimes folks find good co founders because they both believe in the impact. And sometimes you go looking for one because you're like, look, I don't have all the skills in this one area and I need some support, right? And so they go recruiting. We do have entrepreneurs that come in with, their co founder. And they ask like, how can I find one, right, if they come in alone? So how do you find your co-founder Josué?
Yeah, we met in college, and it was two Dominican kids. It wasn't hard to find each other in a white institution. So, and then, it was really value and mission. I think for impact companies, more so than skills, you got to be value aligned, because again, you're going to be put through the ringer, and you're going to be told to go in different directions. If you're not stuck to that same mission and vision, it's easier for things not to work out. So I think that's something we got right. And I think the fact that obviously sometimes you're told, oh, if you're a Black woman, maybe get a white man CTO, get something different. But I think for us, the fact that we have very similar experiences when we were down, just to be comfortable to share the challenges we had with pressures to get back to our family, or hey, this came up and we knew we had to step up. I'm not sure if I had a co-founder that didn't share a lot of that background. I might have kept that. And that would have resulted in bad work. But the fact that we can have each other as support system also came a long way. And yeah, we got lucky that our skills were complementary. So he's much more operational. I'm more like vision, the strategy, product. he can do the finance, the marketing. So that worked out. But even though we weren't looking for that at first, and what I tell folks that are looking for co-founders, just like folks that are looking for ideas, it has to happen organically. I know there's, you get told go to meetups. I think with like if it's a tech co-founder, I get it, but even so, it happens just like any relationship, through referrals that are already in your network and just having organic conversations. If you're really vibing with someone, it'll lead to that organically. But to already like on the first call want to be my co-founder, it's just, you need the foundation work has to happen first. That relationship and that trust has to be there.
Awesome. So one last question before we dive into some of the Q&A questions is how did you guys divide who's going to be and do what, right? And I know you talked about honing in on your skills, but was that difficult to make that decision?
Yeah, no, of course. I think that at the beginning we did everything almost together. I'm also a very collaborative person, so it depends on the work style you need. So we had to compromise on work styles, and also to get that trust. We had that trust on mission, but can I trust you to get the job done even when I'm not in the room, and vice versa. But I think it was good that we did a lot together because again, we were so synced in the business at the beginning. But once we knew our business, we knew much more about our customers, it was easier to kind of divide and conquer based on those skills and strengths. So right now, as we brought other folks in, there's a structure to that madness, and also it's good now in a virtual world where you're not in the same office, that structure is in place. But I think it took some time because first you got to build that trust on each other. First, you got to understand your business and be really synced before you start kind of dividing all these responsibilities.
Thank you. So we have a couple of questions. Some are in the chat. Some are pretty straightforward. So we're going to start off there. And some, I think, require a hefty answer. So I think one that we'll do quick is, when you capture data from conversations, what tool are you using?
I think my user interviews were in Google Drive. So just any good tool to write notes and then compile everything and analyze it. If you want charts or graphs or just qualitative data, then put all that together in document. But Google Drive works just fine.
Yeah, Google Drive worked for you. Thank you. Another one is, how big is your team? And where did you find the data scientist engineer as a non-tech founder?
Yeah, so right now we're 3 full-time, two part-time. Now the third full-time person is a lead engineer. How we found him, it was through referrals. So it's like that rule of attraction, right? You put it out there, you say introduce to a lot of people, and the conversations where it was more forced, nothing happened there. But this conversation we saw, even as a technical person, they were passionate about the mission and vision. They talk about being an engineer of color and volunteering for other programs. And also the timing was right. They were ready to step in and be part of a very small team. So now it's almost a year in where our lead engineer has been full-time. We also hire part-time junior engineer. So we want the product that we're building this for, we want them to build them with us. So we hire them for short-term fellowships, and then as they build, we give them more projects. And then the other part-time person is our designer, which helps with the marketing and also the product design. And then for content, we have other contractors. So we found that for our business, because of the many pivoting, hiring too fast full-time would be a bad move. So what we've done is really, we have a part-time network of folks depending on the projects that we can bring in.
Oh, that's a really good nugget in there. Knowing that you're going to pivot a lot, so maybe using contractors for short periods of time. So this next question, and we have two more. Hopefully, we get can get to them. But this one I think is really important. So they ask, like, as an entrepreneur of color, it's sometimes hard to interact with customers as much as possible. How do you keep up with confidence, with your confidence?
I still get really nervous. Because often so my customers HRD, often there are 30 years of experience. They're often white, and it's tough. So just it's okay to get nervous, and then right before each call, do whatever exercise you need to hype yourself up, and use that alter ego. That's what I do. I go in and I'm Yulkendy Valdez. I own my name. I'm ready. And after the end of the call, I'm like, you're tired, but then you regroup for the next call. So it's never gonna end. But you got to be your own hype person. There's no other option.
Awesome. No, I think that was really beautiful. So, one more question, and we'll wrap it up after that. So, when you work with companies like SAP, how do you measure the improvement in terms of their diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, so that's what I meant. That part was harder. So where we ended up is checking in with them and having honest conversations. Why did you hire us? What actually worked? What you were surprised about? And then yeah, asking them to build that case study with us, and they've been really open. We had a really internal champion, right? With these big partnerships, it can't happen with that initial champion having your back. And so we were able to film a video in their U.S. Headquarters, be listed in many case studies that even touched the CEO, and we were one of their big D&I initiatives. So again, it wasn't we helped right away increase their diversity by X and Y percentage. We didn't do that. I mean, you can't do that. The partnership lasted for 2 years, but what we did was we were able to increase their employment engagement. Employees are still talking about our trainings to this day, and it makes me really honored because I'm tough on myself. I'm here for impact, but to hear that they truly remember that, and the qualitative stories too, I think are powerful. So just hang on to whatever data you have, celebrate the small wins, and ask that customer, what did they hire you? And there it tells that true story of impact.
Just thoroughly enjoyed the authenticity and I think the realness that you're bringing in, Yulkendi. You're like, look, I made some mistakes along the way, and but this is how I learned, and this is how I stuck it out, right? Because it's a marathon. It ain't a short sprint, right? So in these last couple of minutes, in 30 seconds or a minute, Yulkendi, any last words or advice or updates about Forefront you want to share?
I think in general, ask, always have those asks ready, and make people work for you. You deserve it. And at the same time, obviously pay it forward, give it back. These are all two-way relationships. And I think if we all continue to help one each other, it's a win-win. But the world we live in is about asking for those introductions, extending your network, and you'll be surprised how far that gets you. So that's my number one advice, really around relationship development.
That's well, thank you, Yulkendi, and thank you everyone for joining Yulkendi and me tonight. For more information about Communitas America, visit us on IG, Twitter, LinkedIn. Our website is communitasamerica.org. And for more information about Forefront, please visit getforefront.co. And with that, we bid you all good night. Thank you so much, Yulkendi. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you for inviting me. Have a great night, everybody.
Bye.